Welcome to the Parsha Perspective. Each week, we will delve deep in a weekly Torah portion to find a practical and insightful way to enhance your daily life. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Rabbi Shalom Yamini, and each week we will look into the weekly Torah portion to find practical and insightful ways to enhance your daily life. This week's Parsha Perspective is in honor of Eretz Yisrael. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu, may God continue to protect our brave soldiers, and may God comfort all those who are grieving and give healing to our nation. This week's Parsha Perspective is in loving memory of Keshvar bas Shmuel, Edward ben Efraim, Shlomo ben Edward, and Yirachmiel ben Gedalia. May their souls be uplifted, and may their memories be a blessing. This week's Parsha Perspective is in honor of the Refuah Shlema of Shaul ben Edward, Benyamin ben Tova, Rafael ben Mazal, and Orna bas Lili, and may they merit a complete and speedy recovery. This week's Torah portion is Parshas Beshalach, Crossing Inner Seas. Before I begin, this Shabbos is known as Shabbos Shira, the Shabbos of Praise, named for the song that the Jewish people sang after witnessing the salvation at the Yam Suf at the Sea of Reeds. And this year, that song carries renewed meaning. We give thanks not only for the miracle of the crossing of the Yam Suf of the Sea of Reeds, but for the miraculous return of all the hostages, some alive, and unfortunately many brought home for burial. And in the days after October 7th, when darkness felt endless and their fate was imaginable, hope seemed very distant. But with God's mercy and compassion, light broke through, and for the first time since 2014, there are no hostages in Gaza, and may that light continue to endure as we go about and receive the ultimate redemption. Our Parsha begins with Parai regretting his decision to free the Jewish nation. Determined to reverse what he had done, he gathered his army and pursued the Jewish nation into the desert. And as the Jewish people reached the Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds, they saw the Egyptian forces closing in behind them, trapping them between the water and their former masters. Fear overtook the people, and they cried out to Moshe Rabbeinu, questioning why they ever left Egypt. And Moshe Rabbeinu answered with words that would echo through generations. And he urged them not to fear, to stand firm, and to witness the salvation that God would bring. And he assured them that God himself would fight on their behalf. At God's command, Moshe Rabbeinu stretched his staff over the Yam Suf, the Sea of Reeds, and a powerful wind split the Yam Suf, split the waters, forming a dry path for the Jewish people to cross through. And when the Egyptians followed, the sea returned to its natural state, sweeping away Parai and his armies and their oppression once and for all. And in that moment, the Jewish people reached true redemption. Moshe and Miriam Hanaviah, Miriam the prophetess, Moshe's older sister, led the Jewish people in song as they saw their enemies washed up lifeless on the shore. And this was not only a song of relief, but of recognition. The miracle at the Yam Suf, the miracle at the Sea of Reeds, revealed that God guides history and redeems his people, transforming a fleeing nation into one stepping forward with clarity and purpose. However, a question comes to mind. At the beginning of our Parsha, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu exactly what will happen. That he will harden Paro's heart, and that the Egyptians will pursue them, and the Jewish people will go through the Yam Suf, through the Sea of Reeds. None of this unfolds by surprise, and yet when the Egyptian army appears behind them, the Jewish people panic. They cry out to Moshe and they beg to return to Egypt. And if this moment was already part of the divine plan, then why does it undo them so completely? What was the Jewish people truly experiencing when freedom suddenly felt more frightening than slavery in Egypt? Rashi, Rav Shlomo Yitzchaki, the leading Torah commentary, gives us a simple explanation. He writes that when the Jewish people saw the Egyptian army approaching, fear overwhelmed them. The pasuk describes that when they looked up and they saw the sand, the dust that was created by the Egyptian army traveling behind them, panic immediately set in. And even though Moshe had been told what will happen, the sight of danger triggered a visceral response. Knowledge did not disappear, but the fear rose faster. According to Rashi, the people were reacting to what they saw, not what they had been told. Information doesn't automatically steady the heart in moments of threat. Years of suffering had trained them to respond to danger by retreating. And when the Egyptian army came close, when they seemed that they're about to be overwhelmed, instinct took over, and understanding became part of the visceral reaction, and the body responded before the mind could catch up. And therefore they begged Moshe to go back to Egypt, to go back to slavery, even after experiencing such a powerful redemption. However, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, gives us a deeper and more profound explanation. And he explains that the fear at the Yam Suf, at the sea, was not at Egypt alone. Because slavery, as brutal as it was, had become familiar to the Jewish nation. Freedom, on the other hand, was new, it was undefined, it was demanding. Standing at the edge of the Yam Suf, the Jewish nation was not only facing an army behind them, but a future ahead of them that required responsibility, that required courage, and a self-definition. According to the Rebbe, this moment exposed the gap between physical liberation and inner freedom. Egypt was behind them, the Mitzrayim was behind them, yet it still lived within them. And slavery had removed choice, while freedom suddenly requires it. When responsibility replaces coercion, fear often intensifies rather than fades. And the panic was not a desire to return to Egypt, to return to the suffering, but a recoil from the weight of becoming something new. The Yam Suf, the sea, was then not just an obstacle for the Jewish people, but a threshold. It marked a point where retreat was no longer an option, where transformation becomes unavoidable. The Rebbe explains that true freedom begins only when escape is impossible, and only by moving forward with no path back could the people begin to form an identity rooted in purpose rather than survival. The Rebbe writes that the fear was real, but also it was the final stage before freedom could truly begin. This profound lesson by the Lubavitcher Rebbe is ever more relevant as we, the Jewish people, close one stage of the war that began on October 7th, 2023. And this is the return of all the hostages. What once felt inconceivable has unfolded before our eyes, as those hostages, those who were held captive, were brought home. Some alive, many dead, and each one carrying immeasurable amount of pain. And even amid the heartbreak, something sacred has been completed, closing a chapter that has been defined by anguish, by waiting, by uncertainty, and allowing the nation to finally take its first collective breath after months, after years of darkness. Yet closing one stage does not signify the completion. Moments of salvation introduce responsibility rather than comfort. It demands clarity, resolve, and a readiness for what comes next. The nace, the miracle of the hostages returning, does not permit retreat from vigilance, but demands strength to confront the remaining threats and to ensure that what has been endured is never repeated. Never again is not a reflection of the past, but a commitment that must shape the present to safeguard our future. In our daily life, it is imperative to realize that growth doesn't need to wait for crisis. Too often, change is postponed until circumstances leave no alternative. When pressure forces decisions that should have been made choosing freely. Waiting for a breaking point narrows vision and limits agency, and choosing to change while options still exist allows growth to come from strength, not survival. When growth is chosen willingly, it builds resilience before adversity arrives. And decisions made with clarity prepare a person to face challenges without panic, without retreat. While forced change can be transformative, choosing change is empowering. And those who act before necessity dictates their direction develop a capacity to meet difficulty with confidence, to meet difficulty with momentum and purpose, achieving far beyond what you thought possible. There's a profound quote that I once read. The moment freedom feels frightening is often the moment it becomes real. Have a great weekend and good Shabbos. Thank you for tuning in to the Parsha Perspective. Check out our website, theparshaperspective.com. Send thoughts and comments to theparshaperspective@gmail.com. Till next time, thanks for listening.